Good morning, everyone. I am District Attorney John Flynn, the District Attorney of Erie County. And today I'm joined by a number of members of my team, along with two of my closest, not only friends, but partners in government. I'm joined this morning by the mayor of our great city, Mayor Byron Brown, and the equally great police commissioner of the city of Buffalo, Joe Gramaglia. In addition to the mayor and the commissioner, I have assembled my team here that was responsible for the prosecution of this racist murder that occurred this morning. This investigation and prosecution was led by my first deputy district attorney, Michael Kane. The lead prosecutor was my homicide prosecutor, the bureau chief of my homicide prosecution unit, Gary Hackbush, along with a number of other assistant district attorneys, John Ferraletto, who is my bureau chief of my major crimes bureau, Noha Elnakib, who is an assistant district attorney in my office, Ryan Haggerty, and Justin Caldwell. I am also joined by Danielle Diabati, who is the bureau chief of my community prosecution bureau, and my senior victim advocate, Kim Rapp. Danielle and Kim were instrumental in guiding the families and the victims through this process. And they were instrumental in working with all of our federal, state, and local partners in building up all of these support services that have come to fruition over the past 6 months here in the city of Buffalo. And I can't thank Danielle and Kim enough for all that they have done on behalf of this community, on behalf of the victims, and on behalf of the families of this tragedy. The Buffalo Police Department, led by the mayor and Commissioner Gramaglia, I could take all day to talk about what they did in this investigation and how their leadership ensured swift justice. And that is what we got today, which was swift justice. I also want to thank all of our law enforcement partners, the New York State Police, the Erie County Sheriffs, the FBI, the ATF, the U.S. Attorney's Office. Again, I don't mean to leave anyone out, but all of our federal, state, and local partners in the law enforcement world brought us to where we are today. And again, I can't thank them enough. As you all know, there were no cameras allowed in the courtroom. There were no recordings allowed in the courtroom. Obviously, some of you were in the courtroom and were able to take notes about what happened, but our community did not hear or see what happened. And our community needs to learn and see what happened today. First of all, and most importantly, the defendant pled guilty to the indictment. And I'm careful, I use the word indictment and not the word the entire indictment. And let me explain. I indicted the defendant on obviously the highest count, which is the domestic terrorism charge, along with 10 counts of murder in the first degree and 10 counts of murder in the second degree. I did both the murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree basically to cover all my bases. In case something went awry, I had a fallback, I had an either-or position. You can't be found guilty of both murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree. You can't legally have both. So with the defendant pleading to the highest, the higher of the two, the murder in the first degree, the murder in the second degree was a moot point. And so the murder in the second degree charges, by operation of law, just went away. And like I said, the defendant pleaded to the indictment, to all of the highest counts. He pled guilty to the domestic state terrorism charge motivated by hate. That is a relatively new statute in our penal law that was enacted within the past 10 years. It has never been used before in the state of New York. No individual in the history of the state of New York has been found guilty of that domestic terrorism charge motivated by hate until today. And he pled guilty to that highest charge today. He also pled guilty to all of the first-degree murder charges, all 10 counts. I felt that it was important that all 10 individual names were listed. I could have legally just had one count with 2 or more people that were murdered, but I felt it important not only to the families, but this community, that every name be listed in the indictment and that he plead guilty to every single name that he murdered. And therefore, he pled guilty to all 10 counts of the murder in the first degree. In addition, he pled to the 3 attempted murder charges. As we all know, there were 3 individuals who survived the attack, and he pled guilty to all 3 of those attempted murder charges, and he pled guilty to the gun charge. And I'll explain exactly what the gun charge was so you have a better idea. By pleading guilty to the state terrorism charge, there is an automatic sentence for that. That automatic sentence is life without parole. There is nothing higher than that in New York State. We do not have a death penalty in New York State, so the life without parole is in fact the highest charge we have. And he got that automatically by pleading guilty to that. So in reality, there's really no need from a legal standpoint, a technical legal standpoint, for a future sentencing date. There is one scheduled, obviously, but again, by being found guilty of the domestic terrorism charge, that is per se automatic life without parole, which he will now obviously get. As I stated, you know, there were no cameras in a courtroom. The community did not hear what was said in the courtroom, and while this is going to be painful to some, I think that it is important. I think that it is necessary, and I think that the community and our city needs to hear what the offer of proof was at this proceeding. Not all the time, but a lot of times when we do a guilty plea here in state court, we articulate to the judge what the proof would have been at trial if this case would have gone to trial. And again, it's not a necessity, but we do that on a regular basis. Obviously, we felt that it was extremely important to do that here today, and that, again, that was done in the courtroom, where NOHA stated on the record what the proof would have been if this case would have gone to trial. And like I said, the only ones who heard that were the people who were in the courtroom. And now I will articulate to the world now what the proof is and what we had and why he pled guilty today. The people's proof at trial would establish that on or about May 14th, 2022, the defendant planned and carried out a racially motivated attack fueled by white supremacist ideology, specifically targeting black people at the Tops supermarket located at 1275 Jefferson Avenue in the city of Buffalo, the county of Erie. The entirety of this attack was captured on the store's surveillance video, and a majority of the attack was captured on a camera attached to a helmet which the defendant was wearing. The camera attached to his helmet was used to live stream the attack on the internet, Specifically, it was on Twitch. The people's proof of the charges in the indictment comes primarily from the surveillance video from Tops and this defendant's own helmeted mounted video camera. It establishes beyond all doubt the gruesome facts of the defendant's conduct. It also establishes beyond all doubt, as required by the hate crime enhancement and the elements of the Domestic Terrorism Act count, the equally gruesome motive behind the defendant's conduct. In just over 2 minutes, the defendant, with the intent to murder as many African Americans as he could, killed 10 innocent black people and attempted to kill 3 others. The video evidence shows that when the defendant exited his vehicle, which was a 2003 Ford Taurus, outside of the Tops Market, he was armed with a semi-automatic rifle that he illegally modified into an assault weapon. He did this by taking the assault weapon that he bought legally with the 5 rounds that were in the store purchase gun. He unmolded, took out the 5-round magazine and inserted his own 30-round magazine. That action in and of itself makes it an illegal weapon, and as such, why he pled guilty to the criminal possession of a weapon charge. He was also wearing tactical gear that included a helmet, a bulletproof vest, and fatigues. Just before 2:30 p.m. on that afternoon, when the defendant exited his vehicle and while outside the store, he immediately and intentionally shot and killed Roberta Drury, who was walking in the parking lot, by shooting her twice in the head. The defendant did this because Roberta Drury was African American. Seconds later, he intentionally shot and killed Haywood Patterson, who was standing by the trunk of a vehicle, by shooting him twice in the torso and once in his right arm. The defendant did this because Haywood Patterson was an African American. The defendant then made his way toward the store. This was the first time that he randomly fired his weapon. He randomly fired his weapon and shot out some of the front windows of the Top store. As he was walking toward the store, he intentionally shot and seriously injured Zaire Goodman, who was near the front door. The defendant did this because Zaire Goodman was African American. Moving further into the store now, the defendant encountered numerous customers and staff. Their screams of fear and confusion are heard on the defendant's camera. The defendant then intentionally shot and killed Pearl Young, who was just outside the entrance of the store, by shooting her multiple times, including the fatal shot to her head. The defendant did this because Pearl Young was African American. Ruth Whitfield and Chelstine Cheney were standing by a wall display between the front door and the registers. The defendant intentionally shot and killed Ruth Whitfield by shooting her multiple times in the torso. The defendant did this because Ruth Whitfield was African American. The defendant then intentionally shot and killed Chelstine Cheney by shooting her multiple times in the head and torso. The defendant did this because Celestine Cheney was a black person. It was at this point that the defendant encountered Aaron Salter, a retired Buffalo police officer who was working as the store's security guard. Aaron was armed, but he only had a 9mm pistol. He returned fire on the defendant, who was armed with a high-capacity weapon and protected by body armor. This caused the defendant to retreat and cover and gave him the opportunity to reload his magazine before shooting Aaron Salter multiple times in the body and head. The defendant did this because Aaron Salter was African American. Besides shooting randomly at the front windows of the tops when he was walking into the store, the shots that he fired at Aaron Salter and missed were the only shots that he missed hitting a person the whole day. Every other shot that he fired was a calculated shot that struck his victim. By engaging the defendant, though, Aaron Salter's acts allowed time for customers and staff to flee for safety. And I know the mayor has said this multiple times, but Aaron Salter was a true hero that afternoon. As the defendant proceeded through the front of the store, he shot and attempted to kill 2 other people. Jennifer Warrington, a pharmacist, was working in the store's pharmacy at the time, and she was shot and injured. And Christopher Braden, who was the store's manager and near the registers, was also shot and injured. The defendant, after shooting Christopher, closed in on him. And while Christopher Braden was laying on the floor, badly wounded, the defendant pointed his rifle at him. But he did not shoot him. He actually said to him, "I'm sorry." And he did this because Christopher Braden was white. Thus, further demonstrating the defendant's racially motivated attack of black people in the store. This defendant then moved quickly and methodically throughout the store, exactly as he had planned. The defendant then intentionally shot and killed Andre McNeil, who was hiding underneath a register, by shooting him about the head, neck, and torso. The defendant did this because Andre McNeil was African American. The defendant then intentionally shot and killed Margus Morrison, who was in the store aisle running from the defendant, by shooting him multiple times in the torso. Again, the defendant did this because Margus Morrison was African American. The defendant then intentionally shot and killed Catherine Massey, who was in a store aisle, by shooting her in the head. The defendant did this because Catherine Massey was African American. The defendant then intentionally shot and killed his last victim, Geraldine Talley, who was in a store aisle, by shooting her in the head. Again, the defendant did this because Geraldine Talley was African American. The defendant then attempted to make his way out of the store, where he was confronted by uniformed Buffalo police officers in the front foyer. The defendant was still in possession of the assault weapon used and wearing his body armor with helmet camera attached thereto. Buffalo police officers took the defendant into custody and secured the assault weapon without anyone else getting injured or killed. They took the weapon that was used to kill 10 African Americans and attempt to kill 3 others. Although the attack lasted just over 2 minutes, the defendant's planning of a racially motivated attack occurred over a span of several months he researched and specifically targeted the Tops Market on Jefferson Avenue because of its location. He even went so far as to do a Google search of the zip code in New York State that had the highest concentration of African Americans. To further his plans of a racially motivated attack, there are at least 2 documented dates in March in which he visited Tops on Jefferson Avenue. During his visits, his preparation included, but is not limited to, the diagramming of the interior and exterior of the store, taking notes of the security guards and their weapons, as well as noting the time of day when the store was most populated with African Americans. Also included in his planning of this racially motivated attack was researching how to illegally modify his semi-automatic rifle to allow him to kill as many African Americans as he could in the shortest amount of time. He performed the illegal modifications himself while in his parents' home. The change the defendant made to the rifle modified it into an illegal assault weapon and allowed the defendant to shoot more rounds more rapidly than the rifle was designed to or originally sold to do. The defendant also practiced shooting this assault weapon on several occasions by going to state parklands near his home in Broome County leading up to the attack. On the aforementioned assault weapon used during the attack, as well as the shotgun and rifle that were recovered from his vehicle, were writings consistent with white supremacy ideology. These writings included phrases and symbols commonly used by white supremacists. The writings also included names of individuals who have committed similar acts of terrorism and mass shootings in the past. Further evidence of the defendant's motivation and hate were found a 180-page document authored in part by him and located on his computer and posted to the internet shortly before the attack. This document outlined the defendant's goals behind the attack, which were to kill as many African Americans as possible, avoid dying, and spread ideals. The document also detailed the defendant's hateful beliefs, specifically his hatred for African Americans, Jewish people, immigrants, and other minorities. As I mentioned, the defendant attached a video camera onto his helmet in order to record this video and live stream this racially motivated attack to as many people as possible, and to further spread his hate and his white supremacy ideology. Based on the foregoing, the people's evidence and proof of the defendant's guilt is overwhelming. And as such, the proof at trial would have established beyond a reasonable doubt that on or about May 14th, 2022, in the county of Erie, the defendant committed the crimes of domestic acts of terrorism motivated by hate in the first degree, 10 counts of murder in the first degree, 3 counts of attempted murder in the second degree as a hate crime, as well as criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree. I know the mayor has, he specifically mentioned this at the indictment when we did a press conference, and that was the need for this community to see swift justice done. And this case is a poster child for swift justice. first of all, there was swift justice by him and his troops in the capture of this individual. That was swift. There was swift justice done in the arrest. He was arrested within hours. He was arraigned by 6 o'clock that evening. He was indicted not a few weeks later on all the counts in the indictment here that I've articulated. The discovery was turned over immediately. The discovery was voluminous. But this team right here made sure that every document, all the discovery, was turned over to the defense lawyers immediately. That was swift. And again, as we know today, he pleaded guilty. Now, however swift this was, equally important was the fairness. This was not only swift justice, this was fair justice. I made sure at the very beginning that I did all I could to ensure that the defendant got a fair trial. And I did that, quite frankly, by garnering some criticism. I was very concerned in the days following this horrific homicide that the defense lawyers were going to make a motion for a change of venue. And again, I'm not blaming anyone. No one's at fault here. But obviously, the rhetoric was high. Everyone was saying he's a racist. Everyone was saying he's a murderer, et cetera, et cetera. And again, that's obviously justified by today. But I was concerned about not having this trial here in Buffalo. And my main concern was if they would have been a change of venue, the trial would have been in like Cattaraugus County or Allegheny County, and the jury would have been made up of white people. And I wanted to make sure he was tried by a jury that looked like the victims of this case. I wanted the jury here in Buffalo. I wanted an Erie County jury so there would be African Americans in that jury box. That was my concern. And so I articulated at the time that he was innocent until proven guilty, which obviously is the law. But a lot of people took offense to me saying that. A lot of people didn't like the fact that I said that he was innocent until proven guilty. Obviously, I didn't believe he was innocent. Of course I didn't believe that. I only articulated that because I wanted to do whatever I could to ensure a fair trial. I wanted to do whatever I could to ensure that he was tried here in Buffalo, New York, with a jury that had African Americans in that jury box, and not some white jury in Cattaraugus County. That was my concern, and that's why I said that. So, again, if I offended anyone, 6 months ago when I said that, I apologize. I didn't mean to offend anyone by that. I did it for a reason. I always have a reason. And I remember the mayor telling me, you upset some people, DA, but the mayor had my back though and said, he told everyone, believe me, Flynn's got a reason. You got to trust him. And so that was my reasoning. But thank God we won't need that now. Thank God we don't need a jury because he pled guilty today. And thank God the families and the victims who survived this and this community don't have to endure a long, protracted trial. Today, justice at my level is complete. Obviously, the federal government still has their charges. Their charges are exactly the same as mine. So The only difference, obviously, is that the federal government has the death penalty. And but from a charging standpoint, from my standpoint, at my level, justice has been done today. But while justice has been accomplished, nothing will ever bring back the 10 beautiful people who lost their lives on that day. This past Thursday on Thanksgiving, there were 10 empty chairs at the Thanksgiving table. And as we go into the holiday season now, there's going to be 10 empty spaces around Christmas trees at the families' houses. I tell people all the time that I can never provide full closure. There's never going to be full closure for these families. All I can do is provide legal closure. And that I have done. And hopefully, the legal closure will help the healing process. Hopefully, the legal closure will provide the families and the victims some measure of relief so that they can now get on with their lives. But this was their first Thanksgiving without their loved one. And this is going to be their first Christmas or holiday season without their loved one as well. And we need to remember that. As we go into the holiday season here, let us not forget. And let us continue to pray for the victims and their families and this community. As we roll into 2023, let us also not forget. And as the years go by and the cameras go away, we as a community can never forget. And while we never forget, and we should never forget, we need not dwell on the negative or hate, because then this racist murderer will have won. So let us remember the love that each one of these 10 wonderful people brought into this world, and spread that love throughout our community, throughout this country, and throughout this world. This racist murderer did not fulfill what he set out to accomplish. He failed. He failed miserably. Because today, this city, this community is stronger and better than it ever was. And we have shown the world that racism has no part in our community. And we need to always remember, because the victims have shown it, the families have shown it, the community has shown it, and what they've shown is that love always conquers